Russia's national security strategy describes NATO as a mortal threat to the Russian Federation. Yet Russia has just accepted NATO's invitation to attend the Western Alliance's November 20th meeting in Lisbon to discuss whether Russia should join NATO in building an anti-missile shield. What are we to make of this seemingly contradictory signal? I put this question to Mr. Juurd Eijsvoogel, the international relations columnist for the highly respected Dutch newspaper NRC Handelsblad. He is one of the more astute European observers of transatlantic Russian relations. Here's my conversation with Mr. Eijsvoogel. Russia's strategic doctrine still classifies NATO as a major strategic threat to the Russian Federation. Yet President Medvedev has just accepted NATO's invitation to join it in Lisbon, November 20. What do you think is behind that?
Yes, I think that I was surprised by the doctrine. I think it was in February, and the harsh language in there. And I really think that we see some signs of a change of course since then. The speech of President Medvedev in July, for example, talking about modernization of international relations was a sign of that. And of course the decision to participate in the summit in Lisbon as well.
But do you think there will be internal support for this action?
Well, I think it's very hard for many people, at least for me, to be a good Kremlin watcher and see what's going inside Russia and inside the Kremlin, and whether President Medvedev has the support here of the, let's say, the policy elites and of Prime Minister Putin.
Right.
But I think if we judge Russia on its acts, I think this is really a diplomatic act. It's not just words. If he's going to be in Lisbon, he's going to be attending this summit with the same alliance that, as you mentioned in the doctrine, was called a threat and a danger to the Russian Federation. So that it's really a sort of a new post here.
The act of attending, you're saying, is just as important as any decisions that are made, perhaps even more important at this stage.
Yes, but I also think that it's not just the act of attending. I mean, there have been a number of events and of decisions from Russia that are, you could say, hopeful. I mean, a number of larger and smaller acts that Russia has shown over the last couple of months, from the way that they finally agreed with Norway to end this conflict on the border in the Barents Sea. They decided to put an end to that and to get to an agreement with Norway. Also, we see with Poland, I mean, the relation with Poland, of course, is famously difficult and sensitive, and yet in recent months one can see that there is a significant improvement there. Very, very hopeful too. Look what's going on in Kyrgyzstan, where the Russians could have really made it very difficult by grabbing more of the power there in the chaotic situation this spring, but they didn't do that. Also, the way they agree with NATO, that NATO can have some transportation of supplies to Afghanistan through Russian airspace. I mean, these are all signs of sort of an opening up to the West and to more international relations, I think.
So, Mr. Eijsvoogel, let me turn the question around then. Do you think NATO is capable of adapting to these initiatives by Russia? And I'm thinking here specifically of the split within NATO between the Western countries and the Central and Eastern countries that look at Russia as a major threat?
If you would have asked me a year ago, or maybe even half a year ago, I would have said, well, it's very difficult because NATO is really split in a very serious way here. But of course, NATO is dominated by the United States, and the United States is a real priority.
Right.
And it seems that he's really putting an effort in to get NATO to agree, NATO as a whole, to improve relations with Russia in a way that is not threatening to the former states of the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe.
And so in that respect, then, the so-called reset that we talk about here in the U.S. With Russia seems to be working?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic, I have to say, because, of course, I mean, I don't want to close my eyes, for example, to the internal situation in Russia. You know, there might be tactical considerations to go on this path. You see that internally in Russia, there is considerably less reason for optimism and considerably less signs of modernization. I mean, there are authoritarian trends that it's very hard to completely de-link and to separate that from the foreign policy.
Correct.
So it's hard really to trust that this is the way that Russia is going. But I think what is encouraging is that when you look to the speeches of President Medvedev, you see there is a realization in the Kremlin that it's in Russia's interest, not to keep on having this tense relationship with the United States and with Europe, with the rest of the world. I mean, they realize that both for economic and political reasons, it's not enough for them to have good relations with Nicaragua and Venezuela and Belarus. I mean, they need to reach out to the world, and the world will reach out to them.
Do you think there is anything to the theory that Russia will ultimately have to choose between the giant power on its east, i.e. China, and the West? It just can't be hanging in there in midair.
I think there is something to that, and of course it's very difficult because it's not pronounced in that way in Moscow, of course. And the China thing is, I mean, it's huge and it's there, and of course if only from a demographic point of view, let alone also the economic and point of view and military point of view. But it's a very big issue, and I don't think in serious people in Moscow don't consider NATO and the United States and Europe really as a threat, as it's said in the doctrine. I mean, you can't really be serious in considering this a real threat to Russia.
The issue of NATO and Holland, I mean, we've seen a government collapse in your country because of the situation in Afghanistan. Do you think that there is as much, if I may use the word, hostility towards NATO as there is towards the campaign in Afghanistan? How do you describe what took place in Holland for our listeners?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think that if you look to international opinion polls comparing different NATO countries, you see that the popular support for NATO in the Netherlands is quite high. I think that it's 60 to 70% on year after year of popular support for NATO, considerably more than in countries like Germany and France, for example. And I think that will translate also in a re-engagement with the Netherlands of the Netherlands in one way in Afghanistan. I think the new government in the Netherlands will make a point of that very soon. Probably in the coming weeks, they will announce some way to return to Afghanistan. And I think in general, any Dutch government would feel really that NATO is an important pillar in Dutch foreign policy.
And how about the European Union? Its common security and defense policy has been making strides. Do you think that there is a place for NATO and the European Union to come together?
I think it should really be a priority, and it's a shame that it's not possible now, mostly because of the Turkey-Cyprus issue, where NATO and the European Union can't really collaborate because not all of the members agree with that. And I think this is a problem that should be solved really with great priority.
You've been listening to a conversation with Mr. Juurd Eijsvoogel on behalf of the Atlantic Council. This is Sarwar Kashmeri. Thank you for listening.